And where does that bring us? Back to yourself, I think, is it?
It does, and to space, which you may or may not have detected, has received an awful lot of sort of press coverage, government announcements. There's great sort of generation of enthusiasm about all things concerning space. And the somewhat surprising headline from Vatican News just last week that the head of NASA, Bill Nelson, on the Vatican Observatory's work to explore the heavens, and this is reinforced by the NASA website itself. He's off to Italy, Vatican, and Saudi Arabia. And here we are. We see the Vatican Observatory website talking about faith-inspiring science, which might ask one or two questions about the beliefs of the Catholic Church. We won't get bogged down in that. But however, what it does seem to obscure and obfuscate is what's been happening at the United Nations. And on the 24th of April, the announcement that the Security Council failed to adopt a first ever resolution on arms race in outer space due to negative vote by Russian Federation. So, of course, the UN, presumably supposed to be impartial in these matters, very much blaming Russia. But what they do at least have the grace to do is report what the Russian representative said, which is that the council is involved in a dirty spectacle prepared by the US and Japan. He described it as a cynical ploy. We are being tricked. And critically here, he recalls that the ban on placing weapons of mass destruction in outer space is already enshrined in the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. And he said that in Washington and Tokyo and their allies are cherry-picking weapons of mass destruction out of all other weapons, trying to camouflage their lack of interest in outer space being free from any kinds of weapons. So in effect, what is this all about, and what were the US and Japan up to, and how does that bear relation to what the United Kingdom has to say about this? Well, really, it concerns what might be described as the militarisation of space, upon which there was a House of Commons briefing paper put out in 2021. And within that, there is the statement, of course, that in the last few years, there's been considerable investment by several states, most notably Russia and China, in offensive counter-space capabilities that potentially threaten the use of space by UK and its allies. The US has responded by calling for a rapid increase in the development of counter-space capability and the adoption of more aggressive politics and postures. So for context, let's look at the graph they produce here, which shows at the top the absolutely overwhelming majority of space capabilities going to the United States. And in particular, on the right, the lighter green colour, government or military. China, again, has a similar amount of government or military, but those two dwarf absolutely all the other nations, of course, including Russia, which is always blamed for everything at the moment. The United Kingdom, it's worth noting, has predominantly commercial satellites. But why is this relevant now? It's because that man, Elon Musk, who seems to be able to do absolutely everything all the time, is, of course, running his SpaceX projects, and in particular, the Starshield, which is described as being available or designed for consumer and commercial use, but it's also designed for government use with an initial focus on three areas, which are Earth observation, communications, and hosted payloads. Well, now, what exactly does that mean? Here we go. Starshield, described as supporting national security, but of course, Starshield is based on the Starlink capability, which ironically, when I took this screenshot, told us that it's currently experiencing degraded service. But nonetheless, it has high-speed internet around the world, or at least not quite. And when we consider the implications or ramifications of this and in effect, the privatization of war, this here's Starlink, and I've titled this Enabling the Right Kind of War, because of course, Starlink is not made available to either Russia, China, Belarus, Afghanistan, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, Syria, or Iran. So we're presented with a situation in which we see this, as described by the House of Commons, militarisation of space, but certainly not a level playing field, and indeed one in which even the United Nations is beginning to meddle and exhibit a significant amount of partisanship. So to pardon the terrible pun, we will be watching this space.
Thank you for that. Now we're coming close to the end of today's news, but